the truth about bank privacy, you posted that a month ago and already it has 86,000 views on YouTube. So people are eating this up. So tell us, Naomi, what is the truth about bank privacy that we don't know?
That is non-existent. So I did that piece with Nicholas Anthony. He was the researcher from Cato that I interviewed. And we basically went back and looked at the history of financial surveillance. I wanted to give a real concrete example of how our privacy has eroded, because a lot of the times, little things happen along the way and we're like a frog in boiling water. We don't quite realize how norms have changed until we put it side by side what things used to be like 20 years ago. And then we go, holy moly, how did we become okay with this current system? Pardon me. And I think it's kind of an insidious
like
thing.
An opera singer. So go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's an insidious thing that happens where incrementally freedoms are stripped away, privacy is invaded, government overreaches further into our lives, and we don't really stop to take stock because each one is like, oh, well, it's just a tiny little thing. This is okay. But cumulatively, over 20 years, this is an astronomical shift. And so our piece about financial privacy was like, okay, let's just focus on the financial industry because right now, you cannot make a digital payment that is private. It's not possible. And people started to think, well, we don't have the right to financial privacy. Of course, the government needs to be looking at every financial transaction as how they catch the bad guys. And so we just took a step back from that and rewound back to 1970, which was when the Bank Secrecy Act came in. Just said, okay, well, prior to 1970, was it a given that the government could look at all of our financial transactions? No. When the Bank Secrecy Act first came into play, there were huge protests. New York Times was posting articles about how it's unconstitutional. There was big pushback against this. And the Bank Secrecy Act in 1970 only instituted a $10,000 reporting requirement, right? And in 1970, $10,000 was enough to buy you a new house in some areas, right? Or 2 brand new Corvettes plus extra money left over for spare parts and taxes and whatnot. So this was a life-changing amount of money.
What exactly did it say that if you were going to deposit $10,000, you had to do something? Like
there were 2 main pillars of the Bank Secrecy Act that it introduced. One of them was a reporting requirement for banks to report anytime someone makes a transaction of $10,000 or more in 1970s dollars.
Right.
And the second pillar of that was that banks would now have to start collecting information. Now, the Bank Secrecy Act, the point of it was, okay, well, people have foreign bank accounts and we, the government, are worried that they're hiding money from us. So how do we catch this? And the government can't just collect everyone's financial information without a warrant. The Fourth Amendment explicitly prohibits this. And so the Fourth Amendment says you must have a warrant and probable cause and all of this in order to get people's private information. So the government kind of sidesteps this by saying, all right, well, we won't collect it, but we're going to mandate that banks start collecting it and that banks start reporting it. And then the way they got around this was saying, well, we don't really consider it private information if you've given this to the banks. We'll use something called the third-party doctrine that says that if you give your information to a third party, you really have no reasonable expectation of privacy. So these were 2 fundamental shifts. And if you think prior to 1970, and you ask anyone who set up an account prior to 1970, they would tell you that they have a trusted relationship with their bank. And actually, if you ask people today, they will tell you that they have a trusted relationship with their financial institution, their credit union, their bank. We all had, for some reason, had this idea that finances are private, and it is completely not the case. Not only has this $10,000 rule crept more and more insidiously into our lives because it was never adjusted for inflation. And so year after year, as the purchasing power of the US dollar declines, this surveillance creeps further and further into our daily activities. But on top of that, the Bank Secrecy Act has been further expanded through additional legislative changes over the years. So financial privacy does not exist anymore. We're at a current state where not only are banks handing over all of our financial activities in bulk to the government, right down to, money transfers like PayPal and Venmo. Anytime there's $600 worth of activity in your account, that just gets transmitted automatically to the IRS. So the government's collecting everything you do. But on top of that, banks have the right to sell all of your data as well. I was recently, and credit card companies, point of sale transmitters, all of this, we think that, okay, there are protections in place, this information is private, and it's not. This is like data brokerage is $1 trillion industry. And if we, like I was chatting, it was funny the other day, to someone who 20 years ago worked for a very famous credit card company. And I won't tell you the name of this company, but he was in charge of products there and was telling me how back then, 20 years ago, they were buying different data sets and correlating it so that they could take your cell phone location data and correlate it with purchase data so that they could get deep granular insight into your daily activities and your predilections, your preferences and the causes you support, all of that stuff, aggregating it together to create these profiles. And he told me that selling this data was actually a more lucrative business model to them than actually what they got from processing credit card fees. So they were making a ton more money off your data than actually through processing these payments. So this myth that when we use the banking system, it's at all private, really needs to be debunked. And we really need to get a harsh dose of reality that the financial system is completely surveilled. And if we want to make private transactions, we basically have two choices now. We use cash in person and don't participate in this global economy where everything is digital and everything is surveilled, or we use an alternative financial system. And that's where things like cryptocurrencies come into play.